This week on Forward.
Calling people conspiracy theories is not helpful.
Agreed.
These are kind, intelligent, wonderful people. And if we say it's them versus us, it doesn't help us understand what's going on. And we shouldn't discount those people, and we shouldn't discount their theories. Part of the story of these misbeliefs is that it's about the belief in the outside world in something that is ain't so, but it's also taking that as a central theme in somebody's life and using that to look at the world as their perspective.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast psychologist and behavioral economics professor from Duke University, best-selling author of Predictably Irrational and his latest book, which we're going to discuss, Misbelief. What makes rational people believe irrational things? Dan Ariely. Welcome, Dan.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
I've been a fan of your work for a long time. I read Predictably Irrational before I, quote unquote, knew who you were. There's obviously the TED Talks. You're one of the foremost thinkers on why people behave, quote unquote, irrationally. But this book, I think, got very personal, and it's something that I was fascinated by because I've been through at least my own versions of it. So you stumbled upon some misinformation about yourself, including from people that actually knew you, or like, hey, Dan, I didn't know that you were doing such nefarious things. And then you were like, What nefarious things? And then you started digging into it, and it led you down a deep rabbit hole that did result in this book.
Yeah. First of all, it was terribly painful, but you're very right to point out that the accusations for the people who knew me was extra tough. It was something about it was extra tough. And by the way, it doesn't stop. It started in early COVID days. We are now toward the end of 23. Last week, my university got a letter that was so threatening that I had to take it to the authorities. And about a month ago, there was a new video out there connecting me to the massacre of October 7th. Not true, by the way, if you're curious. But it's also true that this book is very different from my other ones. The other books, I had some research that I've done, and I felt it might be useful for people, and I wrote it for this purpose. This one, it was a mystery that hit me like a wall, and I had to kind of try and find out what was going on. And the story was that COVID for me, I felt it was in some way the height of my career. It was obviously a problem with the health and a virus, but it was also a social science problem. And I started getting lots and lots of questions about it. All kinds of people wanted to know what to do. Should the police give fines or not fines, big fines or not? How do we do distant education, distant learning? What do we do with domestic violence? A number of questions were incredible. And I stopped everything else, and I felt I was just being as useful as I could. And then at some point in July, I get an email that says, Dan, what happened to you? How have you changed? And very quickly I say, how have I changed? And I get a long list of links. One of them, for example, describes how I got badly burned. True, most of my body is covered with scars, including the right side of my face. That's why I don't have hair on this side. It described how I spent 3 years in hospital. And then it went on to say that because of my injury, I started hating healthy people. And that's why I joined the Cabal and Bill Gates and the Illuminati to try and kill as many healthy people as possible. And I spent about a month trying to argue with these people. I think I
want to dig into this for a second, Dan, because I and people I know who had a similar instinct. So the thought is, look, some people are misinformed, and if I could just spend a little bit of time with them, I could let them know, look, you got it all wrong, and I'm actually a reasonable person, and they would see that they were mistaken, and then they would say, oh wow, like having spoken to
Yes,
Dan, clearly he's not a member of the Illuminati trying to
that's right.
reduce human life. So
And
that's the instinct one has.
that's the instinct, right? But look, let me give you another perspective. How old are you?
48.
Okay, in your 48 years, how many people have you convinced that they were wrong?
More than some others, Dan, but fewer than I'd like.
Okay, but I think we all admit that the number is not very high. That we, on one hand, what you said is so tempting to say, if people only knew the truth, they would change their mind. On the other hand, we have this lifelong experience of almost never managing to convince anybody. But we still have this instinct that if people only knew the truth, and I certainly believe that very strongly. And I also have personal information about me. So
I
people
happen
said,
to know I'm not a member of the Illuminati.
that's right. Or more specifically, I could say, look, on Wednesday, I was in. Here's my calendar. I was in a different place. I even offered somebody to look at my tax returns to prove to them that. Anyway, there is a level of craziness where it's about you that is different. Like if you meet somebody and they say, "Oh, I believe the Earth is flat," and you say, "I don't think so," and you have a go. Okay, but when somebody tells you something about you, and you're an expert on you, and you have your calendar, and you have your emails, and you have your bank accounts, and you can prove to them, and they're still not convinced, that's a level of realizing that the world is really, really odd, right? Because I knew people believed all kinds of things I don't believe in, but this conflict between I'm an expert on me and I have a lot of data, you know nothing about me and you have lots of beliefs, and I'm unable to move you. I tried for a month. I met people face to face. I called people. I joined online discussion groups. I joined Telegram, all kinds of things. I sort of convinced one person, but it was pitiful success.
And one out of how many?
Oh, thousands probably. I mean, lots of discussion. This woman, by the way, the one I sort of managed to convince, um, she talked to me about all kinds of statistics of people dying from COVID. This was the early days, and quarantine basically reduced death. And not only they reduced death from COVID, they reduced death from other things as well. Like no car accidents, for example. But anyway, we talked about this, and I said, look, I am not just thinking about the people who are dead. I also think about the people who are sick. And I said, I'm thinking about the people who are on ventilators. And she said, why are you thinking? And I said, I remember being on one. I remember the hopelessness of coming in and out of coma while being ventilated. Very, very tough feeling. And as I was describing it to her, I just started crying. I was thinking about the people who are suffering right now. I was thinking about myself in my early days in hospital. And I think she decided I wasn't as evil uh, this way, but she still didn't fully trust me. Anyway, I really failed, and I'm a slow learner, so it took me a month of failing. And then I said, I have to understand this. It was like one of it's an unbelievable puzzle.
Well, and it's super important today because the term conspiracy theorist gets thrown around a lot nowadays. But the fact is that there are a lot of people who, and you point this out in your book, just are losing faith or losing trust in various institutions. And so,
That's right.
in a low trust environment, it's easy to be skeptical. Uh, Easier to frankly believe the worst of someone, even if it's based on nothing. So So it's one reason why your book is, I think, very timely and very important, is that you break down why people believe something that may or may not be right. And you do it in a non-judgmental way, in like a human way, where you suggest, like, look, like we're actually kind of wired for some of these things. For example, social proof, like people are susceptible to that, based upon either a correct or incorrect belief, and studies have borne that out. So you break down the reasons why people can be prone to believing something that's not true, and you have four categories, where you start with the emotional, which I completely agreed with and believe in, and you even cite some of the same mindset of scarcity studies that affected me, with the suggestion that if you stress people out, maybe either economically or socially, or in the case of the pandemic, via isolation or
That's right.
real world stress, that they become prone to believing certain things.
So first of all, I do want to emphasize this idea that calling people conspiracy theorists is not helpful.
Agreed.
These are these are kind, intelligent, wonderful people, and if we say it's them versus us, it it doesn't help us understand what's going on. And we shouldn't discount those people, and we shouldn't discount their theories in the sense that they fulfill a real need. I mean, it's not the way I would like them to fulfill those needs, but what happened is that people do feel stressed, and it's not the stress of, oh my goodness, my calendar is too packed. It's the stress of, I don't understand the world. What is happening here? And we've had a lot of it. We have a lot of it. I was shocked by how many college undergrads are terrified of ChatGPT. They're saying, isn't everything we're studying going to be replaced? What jobs will be there? The war in Ukraine, what's happening in Iran and the Middle East. There's lots of things that I think are understandably stressful. And stress gets our brains to want to find a story. One example I very quickly bring in the book is a question of two tribes of fishermen, one that fishes in the lake and one that fishes in the deep ocean. When you ask the question, which one of them has a less predictable fishing life? Of course, the deep ocean has currents and storms and so on. Which one of them has more superstitions? The ocean. Why? Because when things are not explained, we need a story. It doesn't have to be true, but it needs a story. So when people are stressed, they want a story. But in our case, they want a story about the villain. They want to blame somebody else. And they want a story that would give them superiority. And finding a story with the villain that is complex give them a sense that they know something that the rest of society doesn't. So, we poke fun at people who believe, whatever. And then they say, oh, you're making fun of me. I am the one who really understand what's going on here. It's really this whole thing with the cabal and so on. And you just don't understand it, right? Because, and that, by the way, again, it's a perfectly understandable way to plug the hole of saying I'm stressed out and I want a story.
Yeah.
And now you have a story, not a great story, but you have a story that helps you temporarily feel better. So the moment you find out that it's Bill Gates and the Illuminati or whatever, you say, okay, I'm relaxed. It's not me, and I understand the world. But that notion of being relaxed only lasts a short time, because now you start saying, oh my goodness, what else are they doing to us? And then you go online and you find out worse and worse and worse things.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Probably on Mondays, but hit that bell, and thank you. you've started to touch on the second set of factors, which is cognitive. First, there's an emotional appeal to having a bad guy, having an insidery body of knowledge that you're privy to, and then there's also a cognitive appeal that's in some ways related.
Yeah, and the cognitive appeals there are multiple ones. One of them is, of course, which news are you watching? Are you watching Fox News or NBC? I mean, there's a choice on which one. The second one is our unbelievable ability to bend facts to our will. You can hear one thing and completely discount it because it doesn't fit with your idea. You can hear something else that has 3 points. One is in your favor, two are against, and you discount those and pay attention to that. And then the last component is our overconfidence in our knowledge. And there's a couple of mechanisms there, but the one I like the most is called the illusion of explanatory depth. And the way I demonstrated it is I asked people if they understand how a flush toilet works. One of those things. And people said yes. And I said, great. On a scale from 1 to 7, they said, I'm great. I said, wonderful. Luckily for you, I have all the pieces of a flush toilet here. Why don't you assemble it? And of course, nobody can assemble it. And then I come back to them and I say, okay, so how much do you understand it? And people say, not so much. Now, if you think about it, usually when we argue with people, we confront them. We fight. Here's this information, you're not hearing me, there's another paper on this, and there's another fact on this, and what do you do with this? And we know that people don't really listen. They start counter-arguing even before we finish the sentence. Right? And we do the same. We don't listen to them, and we start counter-arguing before they finish it. We are basically in a very defensive mode. And as a consequence, sometimes we finish arguments, and even though we were exposed to new information, we're even more sure about our original opinion because we kept on rehearsing and thinking of supporting evidence. The approach based on the illusion of explanatory depth is to say, don't fight somebody, come at it from their perspective. So, for example, think about the elections in the US. Lots of people think that the elections were stolen. And you can try and argue with them. Stolen, not stolen, here's evidence here and there. Or you could say, okay, let's not argue whether it was stolen. Help me understand how exactly it was stolen. How do elections actually work? How do the votes get counted? And if somebody wanted to steal the election, what could they do? Like, how would it actually work? Like, let's get into the details. And it turns out that when people get to the details, like the flush toilet, they say, okay, I'm not so sure. And part of the story of these misbeliefs is that it's about the belief in the outside world in something that ain't so, but it's also taking that as a central theme in somebody's life and using that to look at the world as their perspective, right? So the moment we reduce people from 100% certainty to 95, we already are in a different world because now they can't take it as a central tenet in their perspective, and they start looking at the world in a maybe, and that's a huge step forward. So on the cognitive side, there are ways to fight all of the cognitive parts, but this one is the most interesting one, and one that we can actually start practicing.
The toilet is a good example. I don't think I could put the toilet together, and I might have, though. I probably wouldn't have given myself a 7 before the fact, though, because I'd be like, I don't know.
By the way, it works on
book.
lots of things. You can ask people, do they understand how viruses work and locks and zippers and so on? And it works on lots of things. But in the modern workplace, currently, the way I see it, people are saying don't have any discussions about touchy topics. But that's actually not that good because we where would we talk about touchy topics? Where would we get exposed to opinions that are of people that we respect? If
Yeah, that you kind of are forced to be collegial to because they're literally your colleagues. So there's a quote from your book that speaks to um, this approach. The first thing to understand is that the real issue is not the facts, allegations, and stories. The real issue is emotional. Simply acknowledging where they're coming from and empathizing with their pain without trying to correct them goes a long way.
Yeah, a woman actually wrote me today about that quote, and she said that she was deeply offended by some of her friends' statement on X, on Twitter, and she called her friend, and she realized that her friend was as upset with her about that, and she basically said, "Let's not talk about the statements we made first. Let's just remind each other that we're friends, that we care about each other. Let's work from a perspective of initial trust and compassion to the other person's perspective." And they still don't agree, but it's a very different kind of disagreement, and they each see why the way they phrase things were offensive. But it's this idea of being on the defense and arguing about moral grounds. It's incredible, and it's very unhelpful because it's often a discussion about something that happened in the past. It's holding us from moving forward. The question of who was more wrong is usually not a helpful way to move forward.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Going online without ExpressVPN is like changing while leaving your window wide open. Gross! You might not have anything to hide, but why give random creeps a chance to invade your privacy? That's why I use ExpressVPN. It's super easy. You hit a button and then you just beam in. Best of all, no one can see what you're doing. No big tech companies, no ad companies, no other companies. Why use ExpressVPN? When you go online, it is just you and you're surfing. No one can see it. It's the way to go because a bunch of big companies say, hey, all of you high-end consultants and spies, use ExpressVPN. Secure your online activity by visiting expressvpn.com/yang today. That's expressvpn.com/yang, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/yang. Yeah, if you respect someone's humanity first and foremost, and then their point of view on a particular issue can become secondary pretty quickly. Because, who's going to agree on everything? Has always been my
That's right.
Attitude, and then I focus on what actually can be done. So the third set of elements that I thought was really interesting was personality, and that there are some personality types that might be a little bit more susceptible or prone or likely to believe something that might not be borne out. And you mentioned superstition earlier. One of the personality elements is seeing patterns in things that may not actually have patterns.
So the one important caveat to say about personality is that it does lubricate the path toward misbelief, but it's not deterministic, right? If we say stress is the breeding ground for misbeliefs, without stress, you wouldn't get it. If people are just happy as clams, no misbelief. So you need stress. Personality is not like stress. It's not like if you have it, you get it, and if you don't, you don't. But there are some personality types that do make it easier to go down that path. And they're not all bad traits. For example, paternicity is the ability to see patterns, even ones that don't exist there and don't exist. And you can say, oh my goodness, this could be really amazing for artists to observe new things. And this could be amazing for scientists to create new hypotheses and see things that other people have not observed before. All of that is true. it also has a potential downside, is that people are able to see connection between, me and Gates and and so on. So for just as an example, the Gates Foundation funded an event a few months before COVID to do a simulation of
Pandemic, which Gates has been warning about for years.
that's right, and they use COVID as the example. Now, they funded lots of simulations of lots of other things and lots of time, but if you say, here are just 2 points that I'm looking at and I'm ignoring everything else, you say, oh my goodness, how could it be that October they knew that this will happen in January, and now you look at other things that support this view, and you build it. So that's one of them. Another one that is interesting is that people who trust their intuition to a higher degree are more likely to go down the funnel of misbelief. So people who have an inclination, I know what's really happening here, and I'm always right, so I trust myself. The people who question themselves are less likely to go down this path. And actually, one of the things that I think that we don't teach enough is this ability to hold multiple hypotheses in mind. The scientific pursuit is supposed to be the enjoying the path of moving from not knowing to knowing. And it's a path that takes years, right? Here's an experiment I want to do. It's never that I'll have an answer tomorrow. It will take a really long time, and it's like an onion, and we'll peel different levels, and we'll find out something, and so on. And in the scientific process, we teach our students to enjoy, marinate in the process of not knowing, and enjoy the slow figuring out of what might actually happening. Now, as human beings, we're very driven to not keep uncertainty alive all the time. We want to know. We want to know. So, but I think we all need to get a better dose of this, not just tolerating ambiguity, but learning to enjoy it. That's kind of the high level. Maybe that's what the the Buddha would have wanted from us, right? To basically say a high level of this is to basically say, I don't know, I want to know, but it will take a long time, and we'll never know it 100%, but we'll practice, we'll get closer and closer. That's a very tough mindset.
Hey Dan, I should know this, but are you married?
um I'm divorced, actually.
Well, because the way you were saying this, it reminded me of my marriage, where it's like, oh, you can't be too confident in what you think you know, because your wife might say the other thing, and then you're like, well, what did I know? Like I thought we were doing this on Wednesday, but it turns out we are not.
There's a lot to learn about ourselves from close romantic ties, right? Where it's a great analogy to think about lots of things that we can learn from where we are to what is happening. We can understand, like, what are the cues of trust, and we can think about what gives us resilience, and we could talk about how many times are we looking for the truth, and what's happening to memory. I mean, there's just as a lens to look at other relationship, to look first, because romantic life is so intense, and we spend so much time together and so intense. It's actually a very good starting point to think about other relationships. So you say, okay, let me think about work relationships. What works, what doesn't work. Start with a very intense relationship at home, and try to figure out what are the basics of relationships. So it's a good starting point.
Some of the personality research you cite reminded me of Jonathan Haidt's work, in terms of there being certain personality traits that correspond to being conservative or liberal, where if you have high disgust, if you have a high disgust reflex, you're more likely to be conservative. If you have a higher appetite for novelty, you're more likely to be liberal.
Yeah.
And so, when people attack each other in their political beliefs, there's part of me, it's like, I mean, you do realize, like, most of us can't control our personality traits that way, and so you're kind of born with a propensity. So I feel like you're attacking someone for something that is kind of innate to them. Do you have a
Yeah.
sense of these traits that make one more open to misbelief, shall we say? How prevalent are they, generally speaking?
So first of all, I think that all of these traits have some kind of basis in biology. I think they have some basis in early education. I don't think it's all what were you born, right? It's hard to separate from the environment you grew up with in your early years, like propensity for discuss or novelty. You can imagine how early childhood would have a big influence on those things. And I think they have some leeway as well. But if you ask me, like, from the 100% pie of all the forces that get people to become misbelievers, what is the role of personality? I would say it's probably around 10 to 15%. So substantial, but a relatively small part of the picture compared to stress, cognitive. And I think that right now, after stress, the biggest component is the social component.
Happy holidays. You know what's tough to do during holiday season? Eat right and not gain weight and not, frankly, get a little extra tummy going because you don't have time, you're on the go. The way you can make it so you stay healthy and charged up in the right way is to use Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. This is the service that's going to change your life. I love their shredded chicken taco bowl as just one example. It's not just for dinner. And one thing that's great about it is that it's totally commitment free. It's not one of those things that's tricky. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, but you are not going to want to turn it off because it's going to change your life for the better. This December, you can get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Just choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered straight to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Great for, frankly, the guys who aren't going to be cooking for themselves so well. So head to factormeals.com/Yang50 and use code Yang50 to get 50% off. That's code Yang50 at factormeals.com/Yang50 to get 50% off. Try Factor today. I would agree. I think that, especially with social media, that there are massive communities that you're joining. You get a sense of belonging, again, a sense of in-group, out-group, a
Very
sense of
much.
importance. I mean, a lot of these folks develop significant followings based upon, their questioning of certain things. So bigger picture right now, and this is what scares me deeply, is that if you were to oversimplify things, you have this institutional uh, point of view, and then you have the anti-institutional. You're all full of shit. You're lying to me. That's fake news, etc. And the anti-institutional energy is getting stronger and stronger because people, are losing faith in various institutions, and some of the institutions haven't exactly done us a massive solid by, covering themselves in glory.
That's right. And think about how quickly it is to lose trust, right? One experience of lost trust basically can color your point of view. So again, imagine that you have two people married, and one of them has a one night stand, and they come home and they say, "Honey, I'm really sorry I had a one night stand, but we've been married for 10 years. What's the probability it will happen again?" Very, very low. That's not the case, right? The case is that one one bad behavior has a disproportional effect, right? And we basically say that the bad behavior is revealing something truthful. Like, the thing is, you could be really a bad person and trying to hide it. So when you act well, I don't know if I didn't catch you, if you were just hiding it, but a bad action is more telling in terms of who you really are. So now you feel betrayed. And you saw the research on the opioid epidemic and the influence on elections.
Yeah.
So with the opioid epidemic, lots of people said, my great aunt had surgery and she came back and they gave her these pills and then she became an addict. When she had to start taking heroin and she died of overdose. And, they basically say the system has failed us. The system has failed us. Now, that's a very big failing, and they could be correct in saying that. But now they say our trust in the government did not go from 100% to 90%, saying, oh, what will happen? What are the chances that I'll have another aunt with a knee problem that this will happen again? They say, no, I've just lost trust completely in the government. So one bad action that has a disproportional negative effect, especially if we don't try to recover the trust. And if somebody adopts the perspective of misbelief and low trust, like, the natural course of events will not bring them up. Like, just imagine what would get pumped. Someone say, oh, sorry about all of that, I trust you again. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. It's a painstaking process. So the social proof, I think, may be the most compelling, important dynamic that people experience in a way. Because I see people head down certain roads all the time, and then when they gain popularity and energy, they're like, "Ooh, like I'm striking a chord here," and then they want to do more, and they get the endorphins and the hits and the likes, and the rest of it. I think that drives a ton of deeper behavior. It almost becomes competitive too, because then it's like, oh, there's this other person over there saying this. Like, let's see if I can one up them. In the
That's right.
absence of these social rewards, I think it would be much less pronounced.
That's right. And also saying extreme opinions, right? If you just stated run of the mill average perspective, how many people would get excited with what you're saying? You almost have to say things that are on the verge of being ridiculous if you want to make a name for yourself. So we have this. Not only are people chasing, social credit, but the way to get social credit is to say something extreme. The silent majority counts for nothing, right? If lots of people look at what you've posted and nod to themselves, you feel zero. Uh, there's no improvement. But what we're really looking for is for those people who would react, and to get somebody to react, you need to do something extreme. So it creates extremeness, but not only extremeness. There's also the issue of support, and you mentioned that before, and it's worthwhile saying something about this. So one of the toughest things is being ostracized. Right, being ostracized is a tough feeling. The world hates me, or people hate me, and it affects people's well-being, and it affects people's hopefulness for the future, and it affects the willingness to donate money, and it just has a big effect on any kind of pro-social behavior.
Yeah, you did a study, or they did a brain wiring study, and it actually corresponds to a sense of physical injury. So it's like, not like, oh, it's in your head. Like, the being ostracized actually is physically deleterious.
Yes, it uses similar brain mechanisms to physical pain, right? Which is kind of incredible. Um, and by the way, a lot of those things you can say, oh, evolutionary. I can see why you would want that.
Yeah.
Because if society can ostracize somebody and it will feel painful, then it's a tremendous force to get people to act for the total good. But because of the ostracism, a lot of these people turn to other communities that basically give them the love that they have lost.
Yep.
And one of the posts against me was a post of somebody who described my crimes against humanity. He decided I was the chief consciousness architect of the pandemic. He predicted there will be Nuremberg trials 2.0, like the same way that they were judging the crimes of Nazi Germany. And he predicted I would be found guilty, and his only question was whether I should get life in prison or public hanging. And about 1,000 people responded. And the responses were so loving and effusive to him. Like, people congratulated him on his writing style and insight and depth and all kinds of things. Lots of little hearts, lots of wonderful emojis. And again, in the same way that we say that we don't want to think that these misbeliefs are for nothing, also we don't want to think that this tremendous social support is for nothing. It comes to fulfill a goal. What is the goal? These people feel lonely, they feel ostracized, they feel rejected, and they are the most loving community to each other. It's kind of amazing. They are so, some of those things are so hateful to other people, right? They can talk in one hand about killing somebody, and on the other hand they're saying that the person who proposed the killing, that person deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for what they're doing. But they're very, very supportive to each other, and again, it's for a good reason. They're lacking this support. And at some point in the book, I recommend to hug a conspiracy theorist. And the reality is that I personally have ostracized people. Before I did this research, one of my favorite sentences to people who started, in my view, lose touch with reality was to ask, what is the color of the sky in your world? And I thought it was funny, but the people who I said it to thought it was offensive. I thought it was a little funny, not very funny, and they thought it was very offensive. And I think that unintentionally I ostracize people. Right? The process that what we think about should happen between people of respect and listening and understanding the causes and the mechanism and so on. It's so hard. It's so hard to take somebody that has these opinions and hug them, but we need to.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. It's a pretty short list of things you can do that are going to make you happier, healthier, more energetic, more productive every single day. You know what's on that list? Getting the right freaking mattress. And what's the right mattress for you? If you go to Helix Sleep, you take their personalized sleep quiz and they will send you one of 20 unique mattresses made for you and you alone. Well, not you and you alone, like 5% of people. Do the math. For a 100-night free trial, you can sleep on this thing for 3 months. It will keep you cool. Don't just take my word for it. My kids seek out this mattress in the house. It's the #1 rated mattress picked by GQ and Wired magazine. This mattress will actually make you happier, healthier, and more productive. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Yeah, this book had a lot of profundity to it, and it was personal. I mean, reading it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like what a ringer Dan has been through. It's nuts." I mean, I've been through, some like adventures in social media, but nothing compared to what you've been through. And I dare say that some of these dynamics are leading us to disaster in various ways. So you go through this personal journey and then through this research journey, documenting various essentially facets of human nature that lead people to misbelief. So, starting with emotional, cognitive, personality, social, it's a very powerful combination if you reflect on it. And I dare say that there are tens of millions of people. I mean, this is normal in my mind. This isn't like, oh, oh, by the way, I totally agree with you on not wanting to ostracize folks. And I try and avoid this label of conspiracy theorist because it's pejorative. And also at this point, you got to say, like, you know, some of these conspiracy theories have totally been true.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Just because it's
there
a
is that.
conspiracy theory doesn't mean it's false.
Yeah, completely. So at the end of this journey that you document in the book, you do try and strike notes of optimism. I think one thing you say is, look, guys, trust is really, really important. And if you don't have it, it ends up being corrosive in all sorts of other ways.
So, so look, I think that humanity, when we discover that we've invented something very bad, it takes us a long time to fix it, and we need some will to start attacking it. Think smoking. And we have rules about freedom of speech, and we have rules about misinformation, but misinformation rules are really about, a pharma company cannot lie in their advertising, and people cannot give false testimony in court. But outside of that, we haven't dealt with the problem, but we didn't need to. The funnel of misbelief with all the elements is a weaponized system that we didn't have to deal with because it was not that powerful.
Yeah.
but now it's that powerful. We never had to worry about, like 1,000 years ago, we didn't worry about biological warfare. Now we really need to worry about biological warfare, and there's lots of rules about limiting it because even very few people can create tremendous damage. And look, it's not easy because we all love freedom of speech. All else being equal, it's better to have freedom of speech than not. We all want companies to do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anybody. But in this case, I think we're starting to understand the size of the damage. And imagine we did the following calculation. Imagine that we try to calculate what is the loss of trust brought about by social media. What is the cost to society? What is the cost in terms of crime and police and tax payment and medical adherence, and you name it,
Mental
and
health
what is
problems, anxiety and depression, for sure. I'd put them on there.
mental health, and also what is the chance that if there will be a next pandemic that people would be willing to chip in and work together. What does it do to donations, to charity? I mean, imagine that we try to quantify that. I think it will be a very, very large number. This is why the lawsuit against Fox, right? They basically said, you hurt our stock price. But I think here there's a real tangible cost to society. It will be fascinating to try and estimate the number, but I think that no matter how you estimate it, it will be very large.
I would tend to agree. Call that a negative externality. Though at this point, this externality is kind of central to American life, unfortunately. Well, you do have a number of very, very positive lessons in the book, and we mentioned some of them in this conversation around trying to embrace ambiguity, trust a little more, don't judge, don't attack, hug someone who's going through sort of a disengagement. Like, don't think that by turning on them you're going to make anything better, which you totally won't. These are people that often are friends and family members.
We all have these people in our lives that 5 years ago we looked at them and we said we are the same, and now we look at them and we say, are we the same species? Like they feel broken to us. We say, they look at the same information. How could it be that they come with such different conclusions? So what's broken inside that the transfer? But the book really explains what has changed. It's not broken, and it's a slow process, and it's a difficult process, and it's comprehensive. And the deeper people get to it, the longer it would take to get it back. So we can do things as individuals. Companies can do things, right? I think companies should encourage respectful discussions with different opinions. I think we could do things, help our friends when we see their needs in our family. And then there are things to do as society. Governments should have plans on how to regain trust.
Yeah, amen to that, Dan. I know there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. In many ways, your book, I think, is an instrument towards empathy, towards greater empathy, where if someone looks at someone with a differing opinion or perspective on something, let's say whether the election was stolen, and then you look at it and be like, oh, but then, thanks to your work, you can see that it's deeply human for people to arrive in different places, even based upon some of the same information. Dan Ariely's new book, Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. Remember, again, that's rational people believing irrational things. Congratulations on this. How can people keep up with you and your work?
Best place is my website, danariely.com, DANARIELY.com, and I try to post everything there.
Fantastic. Please follow Dan. He'll make you smarter. Also, a note for someone watching the video. Dan used to shave, and then when he didn't shave, he found a lot of empathy with folks who had experienced injury. He got many notes commending him, and he said, you know what? This is actually who I am, and let's be honest with the world, and has found a lot of kinship and fellowship through that gesture.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning it.